Hi, this is Mike Purcell, voice of the Tomorrowland Transit Authority People Mover. As we approach the Tomorrowland Transit Authority station, our Grand Circle tour is coming to an end, but not to a stop because you're listening to the Living the Dream podcast with your hosts, Krista Joy from DisneyWays.com and Joe Pardo from HowToDream.co. Hold on tight because today's journey leads to tomorrow's dream. And get ready for the Living the Dream podcast.
Only the best Disney collectibles and other kinds of treasures, too. Barbies, toys, board games, Disney home decor, Mickey Mouse watches, and more are in stock for you at TD Collectibles. Inventory changes daily. They purchase Disney, too. Just email a list of your items and include your asking price. TD Collectibles, located just moments north of Walt Disney World on 535 in Winter Garden, Florida. Find them online at eBay, too. Username Snowball Bears, all one word. Call TD Collectibles today at 407 580 8757 or find them on Facebook at facebook.com/TD Collectibles. Our guest on the line for you today is the author of several books, and he has a unique point of view built on his passion for history, his professional training as an urban planner, and his obsession with the theme parks. He's performed speaking engagements at Walt Disney Imagineering, the Walt Disney Family Museum, Disney Creative, as well as many Disneyana clubs, libraries, and podcasts. Sam Gennaway, Joe and I would like to welcome you to Living the Dream podcast.
Well, thank you very much for inviting. I'm honored and delighted to be here.
Honored to have you here. Thank you so much, Sam, for taking the time, man. So what is your what is your latest project going on?
Well, I've written 3 books so far. The first one was really about Walt Disney and urban planning and the how and why the parks make you keep going back again and again and again, and how you can explain it to your friends and relatives so they don't think you're completely crazy. The second one was a biography of Disneyland. The third one was a story called Universal versus Disney. It was really the equivalent to the Disneyland story in the sense it was the history of Universal Studios here in Los Angeles and the creation of Universal Studios Florida. The main character in that book was a guy named Jay Stein. Jay Stein is fundamentally the guy behind the whole Universal Studios experience, and he retired a few decades ago and decided not to talk to the press at all. And he wouldn't even talk to me about the book I was writing, but he read it, he liked it, and he contacted me. And so we're writing. It's going to be a very different book than anything I've written. I'm very excited about it. It's going to be an insider look at how you invent the theme park industry, unlike any story I could have possibly ever imagined. So I'm having a lot of fun writing it. It'll come out sometime later this year, I hope.
Okay, so what inspired you? You wanted to just do something different that nobody else, from a different angle?
Well, I was been really privileged on the first 2 books to try to get inside of Walt Disney's head and try to get inside of the Imagineers who created the whole Disney theme park experience. Talking to Jay Stein is the equivalent of talking to Walt Disney from the Universal perspective, because he's the guy that invented these whole things. He is the guy who, when the studio tour was about to get shuffled off into history in about 1967, was hired to run the tour. And he got that tour to become what it was and become so big. And then in Florida, he was the guy that single-handedly, within the entire company of Universal, he was the guy that single-handedly pushed forward the idea of Universal Studios Florida and also created what inevitably became Islands of Adventure, the concept for Islands of Adventure. And the fact that he's still with us and he's telling me these stories, and I'm hearing all sorts of inside stories that can't be found, because he worked for a company, famously Lou Wasserman from MCA, who never kept memos. And it was verbal. Everybody told everybody everything. And so Jay is of that heritage. So I'm hearing stories that are just blowing me away about the creation of the park, how they got the property, the battles they had with Disney, far at a level higher than I got with the Universal versus Disney book. It's very much a book about what the Hollywood system is like when it comes to theme parks. So I like it. It's a good capper of it seemed like to be the right book to write next.
Yeah, you sound super excited about it. It's great to hear your enthusiasm. You've written so much. I'm wondering too, what is your secret? How do you carve out time to write? You have a full-time job, a very demanding job. How do you
Yeah.
do this?
I don't know. I used to, when the economy was a little bit slower and work was a little slower, because I do urban planning during the day. I had a little more time, and that's when I was writing things like the Sam Land column for Mice Chat. And when the time started to go away, that was one of the things that went away, was writing a weekly column. So I just sort of appear every once in a while. It's a discipline thing, quite honestly. In the case of the Jay Stein book, first of all, I've got Jay very interested and wondering how it's coming out. So he's constantly asking for updates, which is quite fun. I understand what his workers were like when they were trying to build these theme parks now. And it's a discipline thing. I try to write a couple hundred words or a few hundred words a day. It's very important to do that and just sort of keep a rhythm going on the thing. It helps once the whole concept sort of comes together, because one of the fun things for my books is each one has a real structure to it. So the first one is really I'm a boy looking at the model at carousel of progress, and as an urban planner working backwards to do a feasibility study, and then taking Ward Kimball's way of doing man at space and Highways USA, the Highways film that he did, and all these science factual films, and structured it that way. The second one was a biography that was inspired in part by Diane Disney Miller. I was giving a speech at the Walt Disney Family Museum, and we were talking with her and Ron Miller, and it kind of occurred to me, and she affirmed that really the way her dad looked at the park was kind of like her youngest brother, because it was something he could mold and change, and he really, really liked it that way. So that was fun, and that was easy, and it was a fun way of writing a book of a subject that, quite honestly, has been sort of written to death. So that was fresh, and then the Universal one was just, quite honestly, no one had ever really written before about it. And now the Jay Stein book is because, quite honestly, if I don't write this down, these stories are going to go away, and no one's ever going to hear about it. And the real truth of how Universal Studios Florida got implemented would have been lost forever. So I'm really quite proud of that.
Yeah, so it sounds like you got to have a real fire inside of you and a desire to get it done. But then I'm also kind of hearing a running theme because I mean, you have Jay to be accountable to, and we had a writer on
Yeah.
before that was saying Lee Cockrell would ask him over coffee every month. So how's that book coming along?
Yeah, it's fascinating because Jay's reputation within the business was he was kind of a yeller, but then again, that's what all the MCA guys were like. If they had a meeting and they could make somebody cry in the meeting, that means you had a good meeting,
Oh my
And
God.
I don't want to call it abusive, but it was a tough love kind of family. That's one of the things I'm really fascinated about it. That's why I like the story so much. He's apparently mellowed. At least everybody I've worked with so far in the book has told me that. But I can kind of see why people worked and did some of their best work ever for this guy. And it sort of parallels a little bit of what you kind of learned about Walt Disney being sort of a tough guy to work for. I see that. I see that.
Well, I think being tough, you kind of have to be, because if you don't, people get kind of, maybe a little too lackadaisical
Yeah.
in their work and in their thinking, and maybe they don't push themselves because, we all need competition to some degree, and that tough love can really pull that out of people.
And
Sometimes the
everybody
best.
yeah, I agree with you. And everybody that I ever worked with or talked to that worked with Jay had said that, he was a tough guy to work for, but at the end of the day, they did their very best work for him. They seemed to have worked harder, if for no other reason than to just go, I'll show you. And then they get it done. And so, I guess if that's the motivation, and that's the motivation of old Hollywood, which that's what I'm finding really fascinating. That's how MGM MGM and Paramount Studios and all those places were run as well too. And this is there's not really any difference to it. So it's a kind of a fascinating look at a corporate culture that just doesn't exist anymore. Now everybody thinks too hard, does too many studies, hires too many people, have too many cooks in the kitchen, have to make too many compromises, and nobody ever wants to admit they made a mistake. And back then, if you just went, that didn't work, did it? Let's get rid of it. There's something about that kind of a corporate culture that's both fun, fascinating, and kind of sad that doesn't exist anymore.
I mean, if you had to change one thing about, say, let's just take the 4 parks in Disney World.
Mm-hmm.
If there was one thing that you could change from a design standpoint of moving people around and the layout, what stands out in your mind?
Well, I think that one of the issues that Walt Disney Company has right now with Walt Disney World is that, and it's one of the benefits that Universal in Florida has, and it's one of the things that Jay had done there, is that he recognized that he needed a fairly compact area because transportation costs are a lot. In Walt Disney's case, Walt's vision for Epcot, which I write about extensively in Progress City, was that you were going to park your car in a big parking garage, basically where the 2 freeways crossed each other in Florida. And you would just leave your car there and you'd use internal public transportation for the entire week because you would be stupid to drive around, because you could take monorails and people movers and all sorts of boats and things like that throughout Walt Disney World. And so they bought all that property. Well, then when Michael Eisner came on, he went to a somewhat of a suburban model. And instead of clustering the different activity centers fairly close to each other like Walt's vision, they spread it out throughout the property. And because of that, the transportation network, I think, really kind of sucks. One of the things I used to kind of really like about Walt Disney World about maybe 10 years or so ago is the buses came in pretty frequently. So I didn't feel like I needed to rent a car. Now it's kind of a hard decision because it takes a long time. And if you want to get to a park, it takes a long time. And so if I were to really focus on something, I would focus on creating the transportation system between the internal resorts and the theme parks into a much, much more magical experience.
You mean monorails for everyone?
Monorails for everyone, or for certainly for a lot more of them would make a lot of sense. Bike trails, if I'm at Animal Kingdom Lodge, I don't understand why I have to get in my car to go drive the 1 mile to the parking lot because I can't walk it because there's no way to walk it. I have to get on one of their buses, but their buses, I have to wait for a really long headway. Why is it I have to stay at the Animal Kingdom Lodge and I can't have my little safari bus takes me directly to the theme park that I'm adjacent to? It's just one more perk, and it ties the theme park into the hotel experience, or just more frequent buses, or buses that aren't like old city buses from old days. Something like hybrid buses, maybe, or electric buses, or that kind of thing. But buses cost money; they don't really make money, at least in the direct sense, and so that kind of transportation sort of thing gets lost as stuff as well too. And I think you guys are big Walt Disney World fans, so I mean, doesn't it sort of suck if you're in a monorail resort and you can't take the monorail back to your resort afterwards when the Magic Kingdom closes?
Yeah, I can't believe they made that decision. It boggles my mind at the price that they charge for it and the convenience that's it's built in. But it also boggles my mind why they haven't completed the bridge from the Magic Kingdom to the Grand Floridian.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Well, listen, because that's the little place where they park the electric light parade,
bridge.
right?
Bridges have existed for. You could tell me how long bridges have existed.
Well, yeah, it's a good point. And you know what? And it's easy too, because if the boat's leaving at night, you can have a drawbridge. Yeah, I actually haven't really thought about it.
Dig it down further, or they built a water bridge for boats to get one of 4 water bridges in the world.
Well, now, see, I'll show you how geeky I am. All right, I'm an urban planner, right? So what do? I'm one of those geeks who have a copy of the Reedy Creek Improvement District General Plan. That's because in the state of Florida, you have to do basically a plan that looks at a variety of issues such as transportation, hydrology, public safety, and stuff that's like that. And throughout their general plan, one of the deficiencies that the Reedy Creek Scenic Improvement District has is the lack of active transportation connection between the parks. The fact that you can't, if you chose to ride a bike or take an electric cart between the resorts, you couldn't do that. And if you did that, they could get a lot more cars off the roadway. So yeah, so that would be, isn't that sound very unsexy as a way of making the resort better? But the idea that if I could walk out of my hotel room and be able to look on a little signboard and know that I'm never waiting more than 10 minutes for a bus, and that bus is got like little dedicated lanes and it gets me there really fast and stuff like that, that would be great. I don't really want to wait 20 minutes or 25 minutes, because by then I'm getting a little antsy. You know what I mean?
Well, as an urban planner, I'd imagine you would be probably being a huge proponent of mass transit. And I'm sorry.
I'm with Walt. I'm with Walt. It was his idea. That's what he wanted to do. Is he wanted to make it so you didn't have to drive your car around anywhere. So there you go.
It's funny that too, because when I think of the parks, the parks are massive, and you can walk them, right? Most people could walk them, but a lot of people can't walk them, and they need these ECVs, or they need to have a wheelchair, because it is such a the average person walks 7 to 10 miles a day at the parks.
Yeah, and they're not used. A lot of them are not used to it. And Walt Disney was ultimately a Californian, since he kind of lived here since he was 23. And one of the reasons he wanted to stick Epcot indoors is that he recognized that Florida weather kind of sucks, and it's very hot and it's very humid, and you get people who are overextending themselves. And I'm sure that some of your ardent Walt Disney World employees could express just how many people drop. But I believe the number is relatively high.
Well, hey, and Disneyland's not a cakewalk either. I was out there, my good friend wasn't drinking enough water, and she was getting dehydrated because the sun was just beating us up so bad.
And what's really fascinating is that from an urban planner point of view, you learn that the average person will generally not walk much more than 650 feet before they start grumbling. So if a parking lot's too long, and so the theme parks, the nature of the design is such that it propels you to continue walking even when you're not thinking about walking, and you get that exercise in, or hopefully it's exercise in, and it's all done by the physical design. It's not by accident that people can walk insane amounts of land within a theme park, but by the time they get home, they're like, I don't want to walk down the block, it's too far. But in the theme park, it's okay, look, this is wonderful. You're right. I see that in Florida, especially because people just want the experience that they can't have at home. It's fun watching people who don't use public transportation getting on the buses because they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to go through the front door, move all the way to the back, exit out the back door. It's a great education for folks who never used public transportation to use public transportation.
Yeah, which is exactly how we are in Florida. None of us use if we don't absolutely have to. We don't know what to do. The people that live here, like I do. Well, that leads to the next question. I'm dying to know what you think about Disney Springs. Have you had time to look at the lay of the land for that one?
I've not been out there yet for that. I know that the last time I was out was parking structures, and I was working on the Universal stuff, so I didn't go visit Walt Disney World. I've seen photos, but when it comes to retail places and retail spaces, which is something I'm really, really interested in on a professional level, I don't want to comment from photos. I want to actually stand in the space and feel the space and sort of understand it a little bit better. I can kind of critique the old thing. I never really liked the West Side, because the greatest asset to that area was the water. That's the fundamental human design pattern, was the water is what we're all attracted to. And the West Side always had its back turned to that. And even really Pleasure Island always had its back turned to the water. And I always thought, why do that? Because that's like the best part. That's the vista that you want to overlook. So I'm curious to see it. It's interesting. I think the most interesting part of it is, think of how many times that Walt Disney Company has reinvented the shopping center that's part of the Walt Disney World experience. It's gone through what now, maybe 4 different versions. There was the Little Village and Pleasure Island, and Pleasure Island changed a couple of times. West Side, then there was sort of the halfway where it didn't have any kind of theme.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny you say that because the marketplace on the far side, the far side from the west side,
Yeah.
still has the best view, and now. And I didn't go too much into the west side, but I'm sure Krista, you could attest to this. You still can't really see the water from the west side because there's so many things blocking it. Now even where the balloon is, they have, or just down past the balloon. I mean, they built the Starbucks, but then just past that, they have food trucks now and a bathroom.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, no, I hope to get out there fairly soon to see it, but I try not to comment on retail places because that's public spaces like that are you kind of have to stand there and you've got to feel it, and if it feels right. Ultimately the biggest issue that I see that is always going to impact the downtown Disney or Disney Springs or whatever they want to call it is that the most successful retail spaces are at a crossroads. You have to pass through it on your way to something else. It's one of the reasons why City Walk at Universal works so well. You have to go through it to get to the parks or to get to the parking lot. And downtown Disney was envisioned at one point to be something like that, kind of a portal into Walt Disney World, but it never really ended up that way. So it has to become a destination, and a destination shopping mall is really, really hard to do. It's hard to find that magic thing that becomes the destination that doesn't become outdated so quickly. That may be one of the things that they tried to solve by not allowing people just to park at downtown Disney and then go to the theme parks for the day. Could have been one of the saviors for it as well, because when they came back, they could go into the store. So
yeah, I never thought about it that way. Yeah, it's very true. Well, if we could go back a little bit, I have a question to ask you. What do you think Walt really wanted to accomplish with Epcot?
Well, not the theme park that's there. I think that Walt believed, I think that Walt Disney was a technological geek who liked playing with the toys and realized that through storytelling, he could play with the toys. So with that being said, I believe that he genuinely believed that he could create spaces and places that truly respected people, that used technology at a higher level than what was being currently used in cities in a transparent sort of way. It's all kind of in the background to create a better experience for people, and that he really believed that he could be more than just an animator, more than just an amusement park operator, but he had really a higher calling to do something very special towards the end of his life. And that his idea for the city wasn't that people were going to build Epcots, but that companies could test products in a real world situation to determine their viability. So instead of testing a microwave, for instance, in a lab and then releasing it to the general public, you would just make 2,000 of them and you would put them in the hands of the employees who were living on property. And in 6 months, you ask them, well, what did you think of the microwaves? And they would be able to do real-time testing. It would become a real-time test market for industries with a controlled market, and they understood who the demographic is. And then these ideas could then be put out towards the rest of the world. And on a city building level, there was an opportunity to take new technologies and to try them, show them off, demonstrate them, and then if they really worked and they took off, that would become the foundations for industry. So, I would think that why hydrogen fuel cells are not running Utopia cars would be a question that Walt Disney would probably ask, because the whole idea is that's a way of testing hydrogen. If they can make it through his theme parks, they could make it through anything, was his attitude. If he can get a monorail to work at 99+% operational efficiency, better than any train or bus line in the United States, well, then why couldn't he apply that to a city as well? So I think it would have been something very special, very unique, and I think it would have been ultimately, if it would have happened the way he wanted to, a bigger deal than the theme park or Walt Disney World today. There was nothing in what he had proposed that was very weird. It was just packaged in such a way that made you go, "Ooh, neat."
I mean, 10 years ago, I kept asking myself, why do I not smell French fry oil in the air when the buses go by?
Yeah,
Converting all. I mean, they have fryers everywhere on property. They have
yeah.
their own, supply of fuel basically that they could have been using all this time.
Well, they're used for the trains, so they are they are a little better there. So, thankfully, here out in the West Coast at Disneyland, because the air quality district, Disneyland has to be very, very aggressive in trying to find solutions. But you're right. It's there's weird little things. While writing the Disneyland book, I found all sorts of strange little things that were first. Like when you go to a Burger King and you buy a burger for Burger King, and they stick like with the burger on one end and it goes through a conveyor belt, and then the burger pops out the other end. Well, the very first version of that was a demonstration oven that was put in the Tomorrowland restaurant in Disneyland. And then that companies came to see, well, if it worked at Disneyland and look how many hamburgers they could pop out, we should get them and we should put them in our restaurants. So it was used as a demonstration system. Another weird one that I found was when they rebuilt the Tomorrowland stage. Disneyland was the first music venue in the world to use monitors so the performers could actually hear themselves. And then, of course,
Wow.
you see monitors are everywhere and stuff. So there was a sense of trying to really utilize technology. And I suppose it's there. What we're going to get, Tinkerbell's going to become a drone or whatever that they're going to do. They're going to drop hats on people as drones. So there is that technological bent, but it was rather prevalent in the past, especially for Walt Disney, because he figured that if you had a business and you were interested and you could see that it would work for him, then it would certainly work for you, because nobody would abuse the technology more than the people who came to Disneyland.
Well, I think part of that is first off, he had money to do it, and second off, he had part of his brand was being part of the future. So
Yes.
so it's like it makes perfect sense for him to spend said money that he has, and second, be the part of the solution for the future, if you will.
He got to play with the toys, you know, and if that's what the motivation was, then I say good. That was great, because we've all benefited by that.
But most
So
wouldn't, right? Because like most businesses would be like, I'm not field testing that. We have, how many people we have come through this park every single day? We can't afford to have something break down and then have you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
that businessman mentality a lot of times would set in and prevent progress from happening.
Well, in the case of like the People Mover, for instance, we think of the People Mover as a ride, right? Well, it wasn't. It was originally designed as the transportation system for Epcot, and Walt installed it in 1967 Tomorrowland at Disneyland as a way of testing the technology on a miniature basis to make sure it worked. Because he figured that if he could get 30,000 people a day on the device and moving around and it wouldn't break, then they would really be onto something. So he liked the idea, because the real history of Disneyland is that we never really quite remember in our rosy colored glasses is most of the stuff early on never worked. They had two budgets, was what Bob Gurr once told me. He said that there was the budget to build it and deliver it, and then the budget was to fix it once it became part of the park's operation budget. That way there, the Imagineers could have more money to at least try to develop it and deliver it. So they delivered stuff that they knew wasn't going to work, so that they could actually fix it when it was on site, when they could use a different budget. And it worked. For the first few months of everything, it didn't quite work, but inevitably they would figure it out and they would shake it out, and it would come around and everything would be just fine.
Well,
Well, speaking of the future, I wanted to know if you have any insider knowledge or things you want to share about Shanghai Disney that people might not have heard yet. And for me, that's a lot. I haven't had a time to do a bunch of research and stuff. So talk to me about Shanghai Disney.
Yeah, I always like to suggest that I'm an historian and not a gossiper, so I don't know the gossip. But I happen to weirdly enough be on CCTV America and do the quick interview, which is the Chinese national television channel
I
news thing
saw
here.
that. Congratulations.
Thank
You've done
you.
that twice now,
I've
right?
done I've done that twice, and it's fun. I get to dress up in a suit, and I get to look like an
So
authority on
cool.
these things. Shanghai Disney is going to be a very interesting situation. First of all, the international Disney parks, because most people in the U.S. don't pay attention to them, don't realize that in the case of Disneyland Paris, there were some major financial issues recently, and it's in a very big financial constraints right now. Basically, the company had written off their investment at Disneyland Paris. Hong Kong Disneyland just lost a whole bunch of money, about $148 million last quarter. So they're not doing very well. And Shanghai Disney is going to be a very unusual park. It's going to be the first Disney castle park to not really be a Disney castle park. It's not going to follow the model of Disneyland, Magic Kingdom, Disneyland Paris, Tokyo Disneyland, Hong Kong Disneyland. It's going to be a very unique, very Chinese experience. The main reason why is that they expect that that Hong Kong kind of represents the Disney American experience, and that the Shanghai is going to be a very Chinese experience. It's going to have more meandering paths, wider kind of lands that all use the castle as a backdrop, which is why the castle is absolutely massive and has so much going on, because you're going to see it from different sides and you're only going to see a portion of it from that side. So I think that's an unusual thing. And also the castle is going to be the center of activity as well. It's not just the center where you go and see it. There's going to be a bunch of stuff inside of it. One of the things that they do in China that's different is the Disney company characters are not familiar for many Chinese. So the standbys of the Fab Five are sort of meaningless. There's a different palette of characters that they're going to have to see. So it's mostly like the more recent movies or Pixar or stuff like that. So in that regard, they're going to be more dependent on creating a magical environment and a little less on your familiarity with the intellectual property. The more I think about it, that actually could be very, very cool. That could be very, very cool. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. As far as the lands and stuff, I think that most of us geeks would think that the new Tron roller coaster is the one that we all want to go on, because it's going to be this technology that I've already been on here at Knott's Berry Farm in California, but it's going to be dressed as Tron light cycles, and that one looks just utterly fascinating to me. But it looks to shape up to be a very beautiful park. There'll be lots of little things that people are going to be able to do, some good big rides, sure costing a lot of money. And it's opening in just a few months now.
Unbelievable. It's
It's going
so
to be relatively
great.
inexpensive. Yeah, it's going to be not expensive to get into either. So it's going to be
Well,
about
that's a change.
yeah, they're going to have, this is going to be the first Disney park that's going to use sort of surge pricing. So
Mhm.
it's going to range anywhere from about 56 American dollar to 76 American dollar. And so depending on the day you go. So it'll be interesting to see how that part of the process works, because if it's successful, just like Universal Studios Hollywood, we may start to see surge pricing coming to our tickets at the Walt Disney parks.
Wow. Wow. Well, my goodness, I just, this has just been so great. I love listening to Sam. Like I was telling Joe before you came on the line, like I just get sucked in. I'm just so interested, and I can't
Well,
believe
thank
it's
you.
already been a half hour. So we got to wrap up, but I wanted you, if you can, just let everybody know where they can buy your book and all your books and get more Sam Gennaway in their lives.
Well, this has been great. Thank you very much. It's easy. The books are available on Amazon.com, or you can go to the Sam Gennaway page on Facebook and just join the Sam Gennaway page on Facebook. And that's a wonderful way. And I'm always updating it with photos or updates, or I test things. I test little article parts on people through my page. And I thank you very, very much for inviting me to be a part of the show. This has been
Oh, it's
great.
absolutely our pleasure. Thank you for being with us today. This has been so great. It's always such a great education talking
Very
with
good.
you. Thank you so much. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. And just remember, this journey is yours. Enjoy each and every step.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Living the Dream podcast. We know there's a lot of great shows out there that you could be listening to, and we appreciate you taking the time to tune into ours. Remember to check us out online at livingthedreampodcast.com.
The greatest compliment you could give us is going to Stitcher Radio or iTunes and leaving us a rating and review. It helps us get the message out there to other dreamers.
It sure does. And until next time, I'm Krista Joy.
And I'm Joe Pardo. And remember, today's journey leads to tomorrow's dream.
If you can dream it, Mad Hatter Adventures can help make it happen. Mad Hatter Adventures specializes in everything from family trips, corporate travel, and last-minute getaways. Let Mad Hatter Adventures take the stress out of planning your trip and help save you money. There's no charge for their services, and they specialize in Disney vacations. Visit madhatteradv.com or give them a call at 1-844-M-HATTER today to find out more. Make all your travel dreams come true by calling 1-844-M-HATTER.